Well, my wife called me on the way in today, so still kind of soaking it in. I wouldn't know where to start. Take a long time to express how I felt about Gene. You get somebody early in your career as a manager that gets you and, you know, has the tough conversations with you, had a lot of guts, standing up for what's right, just so instrumental in the success of the Yankees through those years. And, any conversation about it has to start with Gene Michael and the things that he fought through, how much he loved the Yankees and how much, and he didn't want any adulation about it. He just, did it because it was right. And very ethical guy, very competitive, smart as a whip, best evaluator of talent I ever saw. And some things he'd come to me with, I go, really? He goes, trust me, and I did. You find people you can trust, and Gene was one of those guys. He just, he was a rock. The phone calls I'd get after a tough game, he always seemed to know what to say. The baseball world's going to miss him.
Buck, tell me about that phone call that he made to you when he said, okay, I want you to be the Yankee manager. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. And he's fair. And it was Gene. He goes, may not have been my first choice, but we'll see how it goes. And about a week into spring training, he came in my office, says, okay, this is going to work. Been watching. This is going to work. Okay? And that's all he said. The little short, Gene could cut to the chase. I mean, he was so honest and so blatantly, he'd cut to the core of the issue. So much common sense. And, today's game, I mean, managers are so unlucky not to have a guy like him as a general manager that had played the game, coached the game, managed the game, scouted the game, and he could see through insincerity in a heartbeat. And if you had a pure heart and are willing to work, you had a spot with Gene. And he really simplified it, and it's a big loss, big loss.
I remember when you two kind of started what has become the modern Yankee dynasty. He was big on on-base percentage. He was Moneyball without the book. Did you know what he was doing when he was doing it, when he was putting it all together?
Oh, yeah. He sold it to me, and he was right. I mean, I remember the grief he would take about trading Roberto Kelly for a Paul O'Neill, but having the confidence and going out and signing a Steve Howe and he used to tell me, friends are people know all about you and still like you. And he'd tell me that all the time. And, when you went through the things we went through together, there was a real bond. But, when he would say, listen, we can make this deal, but you've got to be able to take this from point A to point B. The talent's there, and I think this guy can play in the big leagues and play in New York, which was a big part of his evaluation. And he'd come up with some, and I'd go, really, Stick, are you sure? He'd go, yes, and that was good enough for me. I could give you, Mike Gago can play shortstop. Kevin Elster's shoulder's good enough to play shortstop. I mean, just a great evaluator of infielders, and also saying we need to move this guy, And I remember, I said, Gene, you can't move him. I said, oh, I can move anybody, but don't ask me who we're getting back.
Is that the Danny Tartable story?
Oh, there's quite a few of them, but, identifying, okay, this is a piece and this is not a piece. Maybe something as little as a fourth outfielder or utility infielder, he never left any stone unturned. And I know he took some grief for me from upstairs a lot and shielded me from a lot of things. I remember trying to go up after games to have those conversations after a bad game, and the shield that he put up, not 1 second did I not know what he was doing.
A lot of people are instrumental in your career, Buck, and I know that this man really meant a lot to you. So how are you feeling today when you found out?
Oh, it's devastating. It's tough, and you lose, a guy like Gene. He'd always stick his head in New York. Sometimes here, those phone calls I'd get after we get beat 13-1 in New York, he'd always call and go, hey, boy, you all right? We'll be all right. See you tomorrow. Everything's fine. Let's go. He never gave in, never woe is me, never shared whatever grief he might be taking along the way. But, we went through some tough times together, when we got suspended together, and there's a lot of those fights you fight that, but he did it because it was right. And Gene, believe me, he'd tell me when I was wrong, and I felt comfortable about telling him when I disagreed, and we bumped it around and came to a good decision for the club. and it was always about the team. It never was about him, the way something would make him look or whatever. And he was the other thing he did. He would admit when he might be wrong. You know, say, hey, but he said don't compound it by continuing to make the same mistake. Let's shuffle the cards, and he would. But he was a relentless worker. Just and never, looked at a game through eyes that people couldn't look through. I mean, can you imagine these poor managers today that don't have someone like him when they first start out up there, and they've got a pure analytical. Gene saw things with his eyes and with his heart and with his gut that people can't even begin to grasp.